So we are now recording this, everyone.
Thank you. So briefly, my name is Katie Ballard, by the way, sorry. My co-chair Lana should be here momentarily. Today we have Leslie. Oh, Erin, I got it. Leslie, who I'm not even going to try and give her job description. I'm going to kind of let them tell us all about what they do. Again, this training is really from the perspective of the Mass SEPAC.
Well, actually, I've changed it a little, so it has a Vermont twist. Just saying.
So before we get started, I'd love to just go around the room and have everybody give their name, and if you're comfortable, if you're a professional stating that, if you would like to say kind of really briefly as a parent what brought you here, and then we'll get started. I will start. My name is Katie Ballard. I am a parent and one of the co-chairs. Very excited to be here, and I am the mom of 3 kids, 2 of whom are on IEPs. We'll go to my left.
Perfect. I am Denny. I am a parent. I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And my 4-year-old, probably about a year and a half ago, got diagnosed with autism. So that's what attracted me to this group.
I'm Megan Smith, and I'm the district physical therapist for the Essex Western School District. I also have 2 children, one who's on a 504 plan.
My name is Abby Roy. I have 2 children in the district. They are not in special education, but I'm a school psychologist by training, worked in public schools, and currently doing evaluations in the private sector.
I'm Erin McGuire. I am the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the Essex Westford School District. I also serve as co-director of Student Support Services. I have 2 step kids go all the way through the school district, and also have a daughter in the school district. And I also serve as the current past president of the Council of Administrators for Special Education. It's nice to have you with us. Thanks so much.
I am Elizabeth Melville. I have 3 kids, 1 passed, and then 2 currently, and all 3 at one point have been on an IEP or 504 plan.
And I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a special educator at one of the schools in our district, and I also have 2 kids, one who's graduated from here and one who's currently in high school.
Jen, parent in the district, got a 3rd grader on an IEP. He's just done the whole thing, whole system since she was like 6 months old. So
I'm Sandra Chittenden, and I have a 18-year-old son who just graduated, who was on an IEP since kindergarten, and I have a 13-year-old daughter who's in 8th grade, and she also has an IEP since 3rd grade, I think.
And as I said, we do have a few members who I think are coming in late. We did have a couple who last minute, unfortunately, had COVID or were worried about that. So again, apologies for kind of getting everybody situated. Erin?
You know, I neglected to say this during my introduction. I have a co-director. His name is Dylan McNamara. He will be joining us around 6 o'clock due to some prior obligations, but he will be here. So just so you all know, when he gets here, you'll know who he is.
And Leslie, I think I explained this in our communication. We've officially been a SEPAC now, I want to say, since I think we officially held our first meeting in like February or March. So we are relatively new. We're also the first in our state. So really we're hoping to, we're super excited. We were just talking about another district actually is creating one. So, and also just so you know, myself and Sandra sit on the state special ed advisory panel, and our state advisory panel is also kind of keeping an eye on the SEPAC conversation, and there is some interest in looking at the Massachusetts law for kind of recommendation through Vermont. So all of that said, I am going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. You know, I haven't done this cross-state kind of live hybrid. So first for me, thank you for making it happen. My name is Leslie. I married a man named Leslie, took his name, the rest is history. I'm joined tonight by, I noticed I'm an LL and I have a CC and a CC. So just saying, that's the way we ride here in Massachusetts. Christine Carey is a former and always will be a SEPAC member in the community of Newton, and Colleen Corbett, who cannot make her camera work tonight, but she's a lovely woman, is from Shrewsbury. And I've worked with both of them over the years, and they volunteered to help me tonight and answer some of your questions, because they do the work on the ground or have done that. So a little bit about me. Why don't Christine and Colleen, because I know Colleen, you have to leave, just do like 2 minutes on your experience with SEPACs and you know, why it was valuable for you, and how you got involved. And I'll let you go first, Christine.
Oh, okay. So I am a SEPAC on the board in many different levels. My son is now 20. I've been involved with the SEPAC since I heard about it when he was 3 and early intervention. I have filed for hearing against my school district twice. I have called Leslie more times than I can count about that and other things over the years. I think SEPACs are really hugely valuable. Even when my son was out of district in a private school because of his challenges, I advocated with the parents of Newton, with our school committee and administration, because I think it's a hugely valuable to help so many families. And when my son was young, elementary school, and we were fighting our first round for out of district placement, it was the parents of the SEPAC that kept me sane and listened to me cry and sent over a bottle of wine and just validated my feelings and corrected me when I was wrong or just simply overactive. It does happen to parents. We are emotionally involved with our children. And I have to say, I'm really
in Newton
thrilled.
is amazing. It's just really done a lot for the whole community. Yeah.
Just to be upfront, that was one of the SEPACs that we actually looked at the website and looked at a lot of the information during kind of the process of writing our proposal. So we definitely were excited to see Newton on that list as well.
So keep my email. I'm happy to answer questions about past behavior, our past plans. I am not currently on the board when my son's going to get kicked out. I have an IEP meeting next week. But I have to say, though, I'm really happy to see so many people in different levels coming into you, from administrative teachers. Yes, teachers have kids who have special needs as well. I think that's a really important to remember, and it's a really valuable tool. So with that, I will let Colleen speak up, and then I'll find my notes because I answered questions too. So woohoo!
Hi, my name is Colleen Corbett. I'm sorry about my camera. I can't figure it out, but and I have 14-year-old twins, boy-girl twins, and they both I think my son or my daughter first started on IEP when she was first grade, and then my son in 3rd grade. And I think right around that time, I think when they were in 3rd grade, the district had put out, they hadn't had a SEPAC in like 5 years. The 2 women who would run it, just, you know, it just, you know, their kids got older and they just, you know, moved on and nobody stepped up. So the district, the special ed director at the time put out an email saying, we're looking for people to get involved with the SEPAC. So I volunteered and, you know, we started, and we really started from scratch because there was nothing. And just each year we just did a little bit more. I had 2 other ladies who had older children, like older than mine, were in elementary at the time. And I really think that's the time you want to start with SEPACs, because I think that's when you get the engagement. I think as the kids get older, it fades. And I know that was the case with my my volunteering. So my children are now in 9th grade, and I've basically resigned this year, but fortunately we had a new bunch to take over. So, so all of the work we did, we created a website, we became a 501c3 nonprofit so we could fundraise. We, we just did a lot, and a lot of that will be preserved now, which I'm thrilled about because it would have been hard to just walk away without that.
I wouldn't have let you walk away.
Well, that's what happens. You can't leave unless someone else. But yeah, I found it really worthwhile because, as Christine said, it's just, other parents just get you, and I just learned so much. And I am not an easy learner. I mean, it just takes a long time, and I think, this stuff is complicated on all levels. If you don't have a background in, psychology or mental health, I just found education, that it was just overwhelming. And so, the other thing I would suggest for new people is just, just don't bite off more than you can chew. There's an endless amount of information and reports you can read, and, videos to watch and books to read, but I found that I can't learn like that. Like, I absorb so much. So just pace yourself so you don't get burnt out. And it's really crucial to have people supporting you. Like with our Shrewsbury SEPAC, I kind of did all the administrative stuff. Like, I ran the Facebook page. We all worked on the website, but I kind of maintained everything. I did all the administrative stuff, and that kind of worked for us. Whereas the other two ladies were more like our experienced people, and they weren't as, we'll say technically savvy. Not that I am, but I was the most. So we kind of, divided and conquered, and it worked out. And now, I'm good friends with these two ladies too. And we still talk all the time. So it's also, you find people with who get you, and so that's really when you're going through this journey with the school, which can be rough. I mean, last year I had my child stop going to school. I had severe school refusal in my family, and these ladies were really just there for me, and it was hard even after all my years. I mean, it was kind of shocking, but here I built the SEPAC, and then the school's like filing things against me, and it was really hard. So that was the other reason I had to quit, because I just couldn't I couldn't be involved like that anymore. So
I totally hear
hearing all these really good stories, because these guys I've been around for a long time. I just want to welcome Danny Newland, who is from Natick. And Danny, we're just kind of doing like a minute or two of your experience with SEPAC, your role maybe, and just a little bit about what SEPAC means to you.
Okay, sure. So my name is Danny Newland, and I am the current chair of the SEPAC in Natick. We just had our first business meeting of the year yesterday, and I was elected for my third term. So as much as I enjoy the work and find it super valuable, I think it's important for the organization that I really recruit and find my replacement this year. I think I have her on board and have her on as the communications person this year. I would say that's one of the things I've learned, is that it's really important to really look for people and mentor people who can come and do the work you're doing, and hopefully do different and more creative, or just slightly different versions of what you do to keep the SEPAC going. I have one child on an IEP. We feel lucky. We started in second grade, and I came to SEPAC through a neighbor who said, you're really struggling and you need to talk to SEPAC. And I was like, what is that? So I sent an email, and someone wrote me right back, and they said, I can talk to you today. And I was like, oh, okay. And I sort of got so much information just in the first call that I was truly overwhelmed. But she told me I would be, and she scheduled a follow-up call with me. So, that was it, right? And so I, started going to the meetings, and, just find it, again, just helpful, because what we always tell people is, like, you find SEPAC like at least a year after you needed SEPAC. So, you know, the parent support is just, it's the whole job.
And I just want to, I think this is a good opportunity just to share our district. So Erin McGuire obviously introduced herself. She's one of our student support director and our director of equity and inclusion. And over the last 3 years has really supported myself and a handful of other parents in uplifting this work. And so we're really intentional about how do we kind of create some of that organizational structure so that we aren't in a position where the same 1 or 2 people are doing kind of everything and kind of maintain, like you guys have talked about, some of those pieces of outreach and making sure that it's a team kind of work. And so all of these things are structurally in place. That said, I do just want to take a moment to introduce our steering committee to you. So myself, I'm one of the chairs. Lana Meteor is my co-chair, who unfortunately is running a little bit late. To my left is Dennis Madigan. He is one of our steering committee members. To my right, over at the food table, is Sandra Chittenden, who is also one of the parents who, with myself, really worked through the proposal, really learned a lot from Natick, from Newton, from a lot of the SEPACs, from Leslie throughout the process. And then we also have Elizabeth Plouffe, who is on our steering committee and also acting as our secretary. And Elizabeth Melville is interested in joining our steering committee as we kind of look at expanding some of those roles. So just so you kind of know, we do have kind of that steering committee who really is trying to kind of figure out how and what to bring and what kind of piece of the apple we bite off, so to speak. As a new SEPAC without a lot of the same regulations, we're definitely kind of learning. How do we engage in those conversations? How do we create those opportunities to engage with parents? And how do we create that avenue with our district? And I think that's really why we were excited to be able to learn from the group down in Massachusetts and to be able to kind of hear some of how that works for you all.
Christine, you want to add something? I have a short presentation that'll cover a lot of this stuff, but I think their experience is really valuable because they've been doing it on the ground for so many years. Go ahead, Christine.
I just want to, sorry to jump in, Les. When you're talking your steering committee, one thing I want you to remember about yourself. And we have this battle in Newton where how do we get parents to know about SEPAC? And you know, we start with the PTOs in the elementary schools, but I'm telling the current board now, remember that the parents of the younger kids aren't necessarily willing to out themselves. You have to keep putting the word out, and at some point they will step up and they'll realize their kids not going to grow out of it and they're going to need help, or something's going to go south and they're going to need help. But there's a lot of parents who want to be lurkers around you, and they're not ready to out themselves to the community that their kid's not like everybody else, and it's a really hard thing to get past. And we have a whole new board in Newton, and I'm reminding them of that, because it's just the way it is. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, and I'll wait until wherever Leslie gets
Muted now. Oh. Technical is so much fun. So I have 15 slides, and so it's maybe going to take me about 20 minutes or so. I'm just going to cover a lot of the basics, just to kind of see the role of the SEPAC and some of the structure, because you were interested about that. And then we can open it again for questions. I know Colleen has to leave a little early, so thank you, Colleen, for showing up. If there's a question in the middle, because of the technology and the way the sound is working, maybe we can wait till the end. But you can also throw something in the chat. So let's see if this all works. I'm going to try sharing my screen.
Colleen, while we're waiting, if you do have to leave, I just want to say thank you from all of us here at the EWSD CPAC for joining us today and for sharing some of your experiences. We really appreciate your time.
And knowing these fine CPAC officers, they're willing to share their emails and answer your questions also on the fly. They're that kind of generous people. Here we go again. So I put together a quick presentation about building your CPAC, just a couple of the lessons, and we're here to answer your questions. And this is based on the presentation I do for a lot of CPACs in our state that are kind of have a loss of leadership. They're kind of restarting, and so they need to kind of come together. We use a workshop called Role of a CPAC, and I just did one for a community a couple weeks ago. It was an in-person event. I had 8 people in the room, and when we start talking together, I can get them to kind of agree to come together, form that kind of steering committee or interim leadership team, and start the CPAC, start to build it. And so this is kind of a shorter presentation, and I took a lot of the reference to the Massachusetts law out, so you get just more of a broader sense. So for those of you who don't know the work that I do, and I just want to emphasize that we are funded by our federal government for a parent training and information center, and every state has one, and I have the link for the Vermont Parent Training and Information Center at the end, because we all are funded to provide training and support for families as they navigate not only special education systems, but the medical healthcare systems. And, you know, a lot of families are affected by both. And we're really a free resource, a free phone call, and it doesn't really matter what state you're from. I'll talk to you, I'll answer your call, but I probably would refer you to your state agency because they have more knowledge of your state laws. But I represent the Federation for Children with Special Needs. And I've been there about 12 years doing this work. I came as a parent to this. I have 2 sons who went through school on IEPs, one with specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, and executive function issues. And my other son had mental health issues. So it was really hard to come out in our community about mental health issues. Well, whole nother workshop. So I'm hoping tonight you'll understand not only the purpose, but some of the benefits of CPAC, really tie it into family engagement, and I'll tell you why. We'll talk a little bit about structure and operations, how you can build it, and then address, you can see I was editing today, address systemic versus individual issues. So that somehow that slide didn't get edited correctly. It's the way my day's going, I guess. So really what a CPAC does is give you a voice at the table. And it's so, so important. So as a family member, when I went to my first CPAC meeting, and I was going with one other parent I knew in the whole district who had a son with autism. And I'm like, have you ever been to CPAC? And she's like, no. So we went together and we realized that we had a structure within our state, in our state law, that was an advisory board, that we could advise our administrators, our school committee of what was working well and what wasn't working well. And I was struggling at that time. And so I really wanted to tell them what wasn't working well. But I got on board. And so we started a CPAC, and it's been over 20 years. I think we're in our 5th or 6th succession of leadership. And I'm really proud of that we've been able to keep it going for over 20 years. And so we're in Massachusetts have the benefit of a state law that supports this. It's not required under IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. This is a state law, and there's only 13 states that require either local or regional special education parent advisory councils. So I'm just really excited that Vermont is starting to explore in this area. It's a workshop that I did at a national conference, and we're doing it again in Washington in a couple of weeks to really start to push state to think about formalizing these parent advisory councils, because it gives you a little bit more power when it's in the law. And I really want to stress that it's a parent advisory council. So as much as I welcome educators and administrators to the conversation, I want parents to really lead it. I think it's an opportunity for parents to, gain some leadership skills, because you're going to need them as your child exits special education. You're going to have to advocate at a state level and a higher level. So I really think skill building is really key, and share voice, the family experience that we're trying to bring to the table. The benefits of an effective SEPAC is I think it richens the whole school environment. So not only will families that are involved increase their knowledge and their skills to help their child, but they'll start to build some positive relationships within that school district. My other SEPAC officers here were talking about the relationships they built among themselves with other parents. And that was the benefit that I got, that wonderful support when I hit the roadblocks. Families were there to help me along. Collaborative problem solving. Problems pop up in these districts. And I think it's really us coming together, educators and families, to solve things. And that was, I think, the interesting benefit, that we were thrown together in these committees or task force. And as parents, we were kind of like new to the whole thing. And we were able to come to the table and to share the parent side of a lot of this. So I'm just letting my colleague from New Jersey in, because she'll forget. Let me finish this slide and then I'll introduce her. So the other thing I think is the parents that are in leadership in the SEPAC become a trusted source of information for the district, so that when something comes up and the SEPAC hears an issue, they can bring it immediately to the school district, and the school district can start to address it without a lot of formality. It's just a nice relationship, and I think it works well. You don't need to put it all over Facebook. You can just call your administrator and have a meeting. What we're seeing as a result of the family advisory role in special education in Massachusetts is that we're seeing improved family-centered practices. School districts are saying, wait a minute, how's this going to work for families? Or they ask us. And so that initiatives that are moved forward are more informed and really take that family concern into practice. And I have seen systems change. It takes a long time, but it really happens. And it happens by building those relationships and just staying in the game. And so you can see Christine is like almost 20 years into this, and she's still working hard, even in the background. We're getting old, Christine. She's having a glass of wine, I'm not. And it just takes a while. So Debbie, I want to welcome you because I know you're in and out tonight. Debbie Epizito is my counterpart at her Parent Training and Information Center, SPAN of New Jersey. And so she and I have done this workshop, and I just wanted you to say hello and welcome if you're still here.
Here, thanks. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Great, yes, no, thank you for welcoming me. Yeah, I just wanted to pop in. Yeah, like you said, I have to leave early, but yeah, I'm really happy to be able to be here and hear the conversation, be part of your conversation.
So I'm just going to share your email, Debbie, for all of their questions, okay?
Leslie, I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you to Debbie, and also introduce Dylan McNamara, our co-director of student support, and I am going to butcher any other titles, so I will let you.
No, co-director of student supports and director of social emotional learning, so thank you very much for being here.
So we're developing a new SEL training at the Federation. I'd love to send it to you and have you look at it, because I think
That sounds great, Leslie. Look forward to it.
we're gonna make you guys work for us too. Okay, so the one thing that we have done recently, a shift in our work in Massachusetts, is we've embraced family engagement. And it's really the research behind what's happening in terms of a better student outcome. So we have Ann Henderson and Karen Mapp at Harvard who pushed out this research. It was 50 studies of what family engagement is. They put together a new wave of evidence in a booklet, but it really boils down to when schools, families, and community groups work together and support learning, children do better in school. They like school better. They stay in school longer. We get better test results. And so we're seeing better outcomes for kids just by working together. So we're taking this mantra and the fact that our state worked together, came forward and produced a statewide family engagement framework, and we're embedding it into all of our work. We're talking about it because it really says schools work with families, and that's what SEPACs are. They're a group of families who are interested in helping the school move forward and advising the school. That's family engagement. And so I looked online, and Vermont has their own statewide family engagement framework. And so that's partnering with the people in your school districts that are doing family engagement work, and helping bring all families to the table and all of those voices to the table. So you can use family engagement to support your work in SEPAC. So some of the things in a SEPAC toolbox, and I'm just going to go through them real quick. Both Debbie and I have examples of all of this in our on our websites and in our toolkits in our states, and we're happy to share documents with you if you need things or resources and links. A lot of times I just send new parent groups to other SEPAC sites on the website and say, go look at their bylaws, go look at their mission statement, and just steal what you want. So you don't have to.
So thanks for the permission.
So a mission statement helps guide you a little bit and keeps you on a steady keel, and you don't get drawn into a lot of other things. The bylaws are just how you're going to operate, and in our state, every SEPAC is different and they have their own operational procedures. So I read a lot of bylaws. They all communicate differently. Some of the big cities have multiple tools, departments, the school system is behind them, promoting them. And then I have some very rural school districts that are, regional school districts, and it's harder to communicate. And they don't even maybe have the internet in every community. So it's a varied kind of thing. You just have to find out what's working for your families. We don't have access to the confidential information of all the families in a school district that are being served in either early intervention, preschool, on an IEP or 504 plan. So we have to build our own communication pathways. That makes it difficult. One of the things I think you're figuring out is meeting logistics, and food is always a great idea. And I can't believe I can't see what's on your food table tonight, because that's my favorite part of going to a SEPAC meeting. But figuring out those logistics, what's going to work for families, childcare, transportation, are you doing it on Zoom or in person? You have to figure that out. So just making sure that you're reaching out to the members in your community so that they can participate in some way, and because they may not be able to come to meetings. One of the things that kind of helps prevent some conflict within the SEPAC is having defined roles. And I always say to the SEPAC, let the people do what they want, because they're not going to be pushed into a role that they don't want to do. So you can't just say, well, you're going to be the secretary because we need a secretary, when they really want to do programs, or they really want to sit on an advisory board on a reading program or something else. So, kind of help people find their role, define it, and so that, there's enough work spread out among everyone, because there's a lot to do. And I love someone said, don't bite off too much, because there is a lot to do. And that's why you have to kind of set some priorities and set some goals. We work with SEPAC teams in another project at the Federation. And when we do action plans, we say, pick something really easy that you can get done and you can accomplish and celebrate. And then pick something that's going to maybe take the whole year that you're going to work on. And it's just, it might have to shift and change. And then maybe start to work on a long-term goal. And that's probably all you might be able to do, because you are a volunteer board, you have kids with disabilities, there's a lot of challenges in your life. You may be working, you may be, volunteering, doing other things. So set realistic goals for yourself that you can feel like you've accomplished something at the end of the year. And I can't say more about having partnerships and different relationships. So partner with educators, partner with other parent groups within your school systems, because all of our kids have issues around anxiety and friendship and bullying and homework, and there's lots of issues that go across the board. So partnering with other parent groups, I think is a great idea, because now you're building inclusive communities. And ultimately, we may not even need a SEPAC because it's just parents helping parents move a school system forward. I did put down the little gray cloud, or it's actually a blue cloud, over the toolbox around conflict management. And I think this is the hardest thing for a lot of groups to deal with, is what happens when you hit a barrier. What happens when you have a conflict with someone, either within the SEPAC, within the community, or within the school administration. And it's getting some skills and some tools so that you feel comfortable addressing that conflict and moving through it, or finding a way to accomplish what you need through other channels. I'm just putting it on the table. It's a skill that I think takes time. And if you start building good relationships in your district with all of the parties that you need to deal with, and build that trust, I think you'll have less concerns and issues around conflict. So building your SEPAC, how are you going to bring all those people to the table? It's hard. And I think Christine said, a lot of parents don't want to be outed as parents of kids with special needs. I told my kids right out front that I was going to be open. They learn differently, and there was nothing to be ashamed of. And I was going to be talking about them having disabilities. So that was something we decided in our family, and I went out into the world. Whatever you're communicating, make it easy to understand. So as simple language as possible. If you have families that don't speak English in your district, translate the materials. You want to reach everyone. You want to hear the experiences of everyone in the district, because you'll be so surprised that how different it is, especially among disability types and among different cultures and languages, but also age groups. So you don't want to be a SEPAC of just elementary school parents, middle school parents, and parents of transition age, 14 to 22. We all need support in all those different venues. A lot of our groups are using social media because it's free, or now we're even looking at texting. I'm hearing all these texting programs that are happening in school districts to reach families, reach them where they're at, and figure that out, because we all have no time. So a lot of the groups in Massachusetts are creating parent support groups outside of the SEPAC or in conjunction with the SEPAC. I really recommend that as somebody new comes in, you mentor them. So you assign somebody to kind of be their buddy. It could be around disability type, it could be around age, it could be around interest in the SEPAC. But it's really nice to not be the new person and feel all alone, that now somebody from that SEPAC is reaching out to you and say, can we meet? Can we have coffee? Can we talk on the phone? And I can answer your questions so that you can be, a more informed player in the SEPAC game and a member. Flexible meeting schedules. Not everybody can do nights. Some people can do morning. I have groups that meet on Sunday afternoon because that works for them. We use our basic rights workshop for member outreach. And we have in our law, and this is something I would suggest for Vermont, is that you put into whatever regulation or rules that the district has to provide an annual rights workshop. So it's the benefit of families understanding the law and gaining a little bit more information so that they can advocate for their child and fully participate in that IEP meeting. But on that annual meeting where lots of families come to learn is a great time to talk about the SEPAC. And so the SEPAC is asked to cooperate with the district in putting that meeting together. And that's been a really nice benefit, and it's at least one time where a lot of families are hearing that if you ever need us, SEPAC is here. And we want to hear some of your concerns because they might be system-wide concerns and we can help work on that. So you might survey some of your members. The one thing with surveys is work with the district, share all the information. And now you're both informed, and now you're both understanding what some of your issues are, interests are, and concerns are. And reach out to your community. Oh my gosh, we all have rich community organizations, professionals in the community that can support the SEPAC. Every SEPAC I know is looking for a free workshop. So there may be some in your community. Trying to turn some of these ideas that people are bringing forward or concerns into action. And you can't address everything. So you're gonna have to prioritize a little bit. You're gonna have to shape the information that you're getting from families. Like everyone's saying they have a problem in this program or in this middle school and whatever. And you're like, is it a real system-wide problem or is it just a couple of families? And so you have to kind of sometimes reach out and get more information and realize, is this a concrete issue? And then how do I bring it to the decision makers in my community and my district? Because you're really looking for some kind of a positive change. You want it to be addressed. So you need a structured process within your own group to figure out what are those issues that we're going to do and work on, because you can't do everything. You've got to remember you're volunteers, and it's 1, 2, maybe 3 issues a year that you can start to get some background on, start to work with your school district on, and come forward with creative solutions. And not everything that the families tell you is going to involve the SEPAC. Sometimes you might just say to a family, it sounds like you're having issues and you need to either work with someone else or call the Parent Training and Information Center and get their support and get some information. Because you don't have to know everything about special ed. Because that's the issue here is we're taking the concept of individual advocacy is really on behalf of the families. We're looking more at systemic types of issues and challenges. I think the one thing that we see here in the special ed community is that the IEP has kind of moved us into that individual kind of advocacy work, that we're just advocating for our child. And we really see the SEPAC as an opportunity for parents to come together and start to advocate for systems change. And then it will help all families. The SEPAC just has to kind of understand that balance. So you're gonna start to collect information, collect stories, whatever, and see, does it rise to the level of a systemic issue? You're looking for patterns, trends, or whatever. Doesn't mean that it can't be a couple of families that have a crisis and you want to talk to the school district about that also. But we're really looking for long-term systemic change. SEPACs in Massachusetts do all of these other wonderful, wild things, so that they've got websites and brochures, and they're on Facebook, and they have community events, and they're sharing workshops and hosting listening nights. It's amazing, and it's just deciding what you have the capacity to do, knowing that your real key role, our state has a statutory role that they have to fulfill as advisors to the school committee. And that is really the most long-term valuable thing. But all of these other fun events bring about disability awareness and bring families out so that you now are building your membership. So there's that balance that you have to, not do a ton of events, but do enough that people know about you, learn about you, and want to be, come involved with the SEPAC. Lots of advice out there online. The Federation, our state in Massachusetts has a guide, a SEPAC guide. It's kind of old, we're working on it. PACER in Minnesota has a special education parent advisory council guide and a nice checklist in there. But my favorite one is the one that Debbie and her colleagues put together in New Jersey. It's Advocacy in Action. It's a national SEPAC guide, and it has such a wonderful tone. So it's online, it's at the Parent Center Hub. If you just Google Advocacy in Action CPAC Guide, you'll get it. You can always send me an email and I'll send you the direct link. It's just a really nice tone about how are we going to go about helping to get better outcomes for kids in special education, because we know there's challenges. So
Leslie, for a second, one, just for all the CPAC members in here, we have that guide. That's the guide that we used and we sent out, so you should all have it in the email, and it's in our shared drive. And Leslie, I just wanted to take a second and recognize our co-chair, Lana, has joined us. And just wanted to give her a second to introduce herself really briefly.
I apologize for being late. I had a work commitment that just wasn't gonna go away. But I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very happy to see all of you here. I have two kids that I've been advocating for since they were toddlers. Now they're 13 and 10, kind of unbelievable. And I've done all sorts of different work, both here at the local level and on the state level as well. I am most interested in the intersection between the special and general education and how students are transitioned from one system into another, while, you know, in a kind of really supported way, so that they continue thriving as those supports being pulled away or brought back in, and what does that look like?
Well, welcome. Nice to have you here. In fact, that's really what we're hearing in Massachusetts, is that how does general ed and special ed play well together? Because most of our kids are in general ed environments and just being pulled out for services. And there has to be a coordination, and there has to be more professional development to support all educators, to support these kids as they move in and out of special education. Because the goal is the least restrictive environment, which is the general ed classroom. It's not appropriate for all students, but the majority are there. So that's music to my ears when I hear that other people are, you know, really trying to make that work for our kids. Because I know it was difficult for my son to be pulled out and then popped in, and then pulled out and popped into a general ed classroom. It's tough on these kids. So the CPAC takeaways are really, you're trying to shape input from families. What are those concrete issues? You're going to really direct that information to the decision makers, the people in your administration who want to know about it, and then can really, you know, investigate and make, you know, changes as necessary. You're trying to lead a positive force for change. A lot of families come to the CPAC, you know, a little scarred, a little negative. Christine talked about having brought a couple lawsuits. I sued my district for a lack of services. So there are things you need to do sometimes, but I always stayed on speaking terms with all the administrators, and they still, you know, will take my phone calls even years later. So it's keeping those boundaries around what you do and how you do it in a respectful way, understanding that you know, we have a system and we have to work within the system, and you can't change everything about the system. So that's just my quick kind of overview of what a CPAC is, how we do it. Not a lot of detail, but we can provide some of those details. Here is my name and email. You're welcome to use it, and I can send you links. I work at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. I also put down the Vermont Family Network, which is the Parent Training and Information Center in Vermont. And you should be sharing that information with your families so that they can get answers to their questions and resources and connections, because that's what we do at the Federation, and they do it in Vermont. And I love those guys. So I just wanted to give them a plug. And I forgot that Debbie was coming today. Otherwise, I would have shared her email. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Here we go. And we're back. We are open for questions from you guys.
So I think I'll start off with the first question. So we have worked really hard to kind of start to establish some group norms. That's kind of a conversation we're ongoing. The one thing we did get to last year was we voted on and adopted our mission statement and our vision statement. And so just kind of wondering from those who've served on their CPACs, especially those who really had to recreate some of those structures, do you have recommendations on kind of where we should focus in terms of structural or organizational priorities for the CPAC this year?
And I just want to welcome Jessica, who is here from the CPAC in Bridgewater, Raynham. So welcome, Jessica.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry for being late. I also had a work commitment that was just not budging. So I'm really excited to join. I jumped on the board last year, so this is my second year, and it's really been great to get involved. So I'm happy to be here.
So I recommend that you have some kind of operational procedures, bylaws, whether you're going to follow Robert's rules or, how you're going to come to decisions within your group. You can do it by, majority vote, or you can work to form a consensus. That's all local driven. So I don't advocate one for another, but don't get bogged down in rules so much as, I love the fact that you've established a set of norms and values to guide you and a mission statement. But I'm going to let some of the other CPAC officers maybe weigh in on how they, Debbie, go ahead.
So one thing I would, let me lower this before I forget. One thing I would suggest is that one thing you want to do when you get started is to identify some of the things that you do really well in your district, right? Because we always want to start off on a positive note, and then identify some of the challenges, because when you identify your challenges in your district, that's going to be one of the ways that you set your goals, right? So, we identify our challenges and we talk about, what are some of the ways that we can address those challenges. And that's one of the ways you're going to set your goals for the year. Like Leslie was saying, you want to pick something that's maybe some low hanging fruit that you can accomplish. And, it might be something as simple as getting the CPAC on the school website, right? And getting that information there that you can collaborate with your district. And that can be, for some districts, that's low hanging fruit that you can accomplish easily, and you can pat yourselves on the back and feel good. And then you want to pick something like maybe creating a more inclusive culture in your school district. That's maybe a little bit more challenging, or might take a little bit more work, but that's something that you can work on over the year. But I agree. So the first thing you want to do is set some goals, because first of all, it's going to give you something to work towards. And that's going to give people a reason to keep coming back. And and once you set your goals, then you identify your strategies, right? So each one of those, for each goal, you're going to have a set of strategies. So that for every meeting you go to, every agenda item, every activity you do is going to be guided by your goals and your strategies. And so, all of that stuff. And you don't have to remember, we use in New Jersey, we use a couple of curriculums. One of them is creating collaborative action teams, which I'll send the link to Leslie so she can share it with you. But it's a great curriculum for doing this kind of thing, especially this part of goal setting. But yes, the collaborative action team, and they have the guide and they have PowerPoints, and it's a great curriculum to use to get set up in terms of setting goals. So thanks. Yeah, I got to jump off real soon, but I really wanted to thank Leslie for inviting me, and I wish you the best of luck in Vermont in the work that you're doing.
And she did share her email in the chat, so send all the questions to her. Jessica. Jessica, you wanted to contribute?
I did. So my experience jumping on, I had a full board, and it went from a full board to 2 presidents, a treasurer, a secretary, members at large, to just me over summer. And I found that as I'm getting into this new school year, opening myself up to the community and really just rallying support has not only been super helpful with finding like, it's like pearls, you know, or just finding like a star under a rock, somebody in our community that is really great at marketing or, you know, really has a knack for secretarial work, helped me kind of build up my board and get it more solid. And one thing I learned as a takeaway was, for me, just being open-minded and encouraging to the community. Everybody has a skill, and it might not be something that they see as super valuable, but for me, you know, someone who, I love spreadsheets and I love data, and finding somebody who like wants to sit spreadsheets, you know, is so valuable to me and so valuable to our overall goals. So that was one thing that I found was really helpful. And also partnering and getting involved with the community members in the area. So, you know, the town manager or the librarians, even the fire departments. For example, here in Raynham, we do have a diverse population in our autistic community, meaning different levels of of support needed. And our police department went through training to be aware of autistic needs and what that looks like. And that really helped our community. So partnering with everybody, even those that I didn't immediately think would be valuable, really ended up building up our overall community. So that
I forgot how important librarians were in the whole scheme of things, especially in our community. They put our brochures on their tables. They pulled families aside after story time and said, do I have a group for you? You know, and just connecting us within our community. So librarians, I love, they're really great. Christine, you wanted to comment?
I think Jessica said a lot of really, really good things. We ended up partnering with our police department. We have a form that if we have a community that might not react well to somebody in who they don't know, so that the police know who they are. The committees, the Coalition for Disability Service that are run through our town, they're adults that have that know what's going on. And some of the small things of successes that Debbie was talking about could be as simple as, you know, your playgrounds are compliant so kids with special needs can play on the playground. You know, something as little as that. Are they included on the walk to school day? Where I grew up in New Hampshire, we didn't walk to school. We lived too far away. So I'm guessing there's a lot in Vermont that are in Newton we school. How do we include people who, yeah, there you go. Cross country skiing, let's put it on the chairs. I get it. But there's a lot of just kind of thinking outside the box and reaching for those resources that you expect. And when they talk about little successes, one of the things that we had little successes was we run a listserv, a Google listserv. It's old school. And we put out calls to our parents who might be lurking, who don't really know how to get involved, but we need an attorney to help set up we keep trying to set up a 504C and we haven't been successful yet, or somebody who's a gadget guru who can set something up, or, you know, they're willing to step up and they don't want accolades, but they're willing to help where needed. And it's really those little things that you might think of are too small to bother with, but they really do make your foundation. So
I think that's one of the areas that we are very intentionally working on, is how do we have that outreach, kind of creating that listserv and kind of beginning to really inform our community. But I think part of our process was wanting us to kind of be on the same page and for us to be ready. So I definitely think that's something that we're moving towards. And I think a lot of that feedback is really valuable. Erin, I saw your hand, did you?
Yeah, I have a question. As one of the leaders in the school district working to support the development of a CPAC, the district has provided the food, like provided administrative support, hosted a website on the district website as opposed to a separate website. So honestly, like as I listen to you all talk, we've created a pretty integrated design, which I'm sure you would be like, oh yeah, that's great. And as I listen to you speak, I just wonder, like that's not a 501c3. That's not sort of quite such a separate entity. And I'd be curious from the parent lens of those of you who have been working with CPACs nationally, like do you see that as a good thing? Do you think actually it should be more separate? For me, it's about making sure that the voices of people who are having the experience are centered in the school district always, all the time, and that's part of our work to do. And it just feels a little bit different than what I'm hearing you all describe. So I'm just curious to hear you speak about that.
There are a lot of models within Massachusetts. I am the daughter of a public school educator who had her master's in education. So and she was like all PTA, you know, all of that, let's do it together. I think it's great that there's that collaborative effort. And when families just open the special education page of their school district, they find information about the CPAC. I think that's great. I think where it might get a little bit problematic for some families is if they're in conflict with the district, if they're not getting the services that they feel are appropriate for their student. So that's when they want to have another channel to talk to other families to kind of flesh that out and talk about their options. So sometimes it's awkward to talk to somebody that you're not getting along with right now. And we've all been there, I think, as parent leaders. So sometimes that CPAC is a buffer and they can speak to maybe maybe Danielle, you can talk about what are you doing in Natick? You know, how collaborative is the CPAC and the school district?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. So I would say that we had a change about 3 years ago where our CPAC went from being kind of very present, like here we are, we're right here, we'd love to talk to you. CPAC would show up at school committee meetings. They would kind of try through the channels of the school committee meeting to give information, but the administration, really the superintendent at the time, was not really willing to be as engaged with the CPAC and the CPAC board as we would have hoped. We did have this sort of very formal monthly meeting with certain members of the administration. The superintendent never came, and nothing ever really seemed to move forward. So I will say that with the change in superintendents a few years ago, things really changed for us. And I'll also say that we needed to ask for what we wanted. And we said, we want to have a monthly meeting with the administrator who's in charge of what we call in Natick student services. And we said, and we would like to meet every other month with the superintendent. And we said that every other month meeting, we wanted to be separate. We wanted to speak with just the superintendent candidly, so that the person who was in charge of the organization that oversaw and staffed special ed in our district wasn't in the room, just to make it like more comfortable. That being said, I've had many uncomfortable conversations with the person who's now our deputy superintendent. I've had fewer difficult or uncomfortable conversations with the person who's currently our director of student services. That being said, after any of these conversations, I always feel glad that we had them. And I do think that something changes each time. Like one that I can really remember, I paced around my backyard for 40 minutes a couple summers ago, talking about the word dyslexia and how we need to start using that word. and that you don't find that word in any of the school literature, and that parents, were upset because they're finding out in 4th grade that from someone outside the district that their child has dyslexia. So things like that, lots of pushback from the admin about why they're not going to do that. And me saying, this is why you're losing trust, with the people that you're here, kind of to serve, so to speak. That was a difficult conversation because I just wouldn't back down, and this person wasn't going to back down. So we agreed to disagree for a short time. And we regrouped, and I will say that the word is now used.
I have a letter from OCR to help you on that.
Yeah, and there's
Vermont use the word dyslexia. We're one of the only states that doesn't, but we're working on it. It's a work in progress.
Right. And, I said, you're not diagnosing anybody. I totally get it. But you need to say your child, has some skill gaps that might indicate dyslexia or might be part and parcel of dyslexia. You have to you got to work the word into the conversation and let these people go and take a look for themselves, if nothing else. That was a hard one. But we have currently, I meet monthly with our director of student services. We just hired a director of social emotional learning. Prior to that, SEPAC did a lot of that work. So really happy to have that person on board. And we usually present once a year. We make a formal presentation to the school committee. But we also have a liaison on the school committee. So this is a person who is elected to be a member of our school committee, who is, again, like the liaison to us. And I have a very open, sort of constant conversation going on with this person. So that last night after our CPAC meeting, I heard a couple things that I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. And there was one thing I'd never heard before, a certain assistive technology that a parent was struggling with. And so I, this morning, sent off a text, and later in the afternoon, I got a text back, and this person is going to go now and ask some questions within the committee and to the administration. And I'm confident that I'll get some answers back. So I would say, presently we have pretty good engagement. And I think if I wanted to engage with them more, I could. But I will say that the voice from the top really made a difference here. And when that changed, we saw a big change.
So I'm all about the collaboration and the communication and whatever. I just want families to trust the CPAC, that they can bring information to them that might be confidential, because sometimes things are percolating, and sometimes they just need more information, and they don't really want to make it a big deal yet. And so that's having a little bit of separation is interesting. I think the reason some CPACs went to establishing their own nonprofit organizations, which I never advocate for. My background is I'm an attorney, and I'm like, that's a whole nother legal thing. Because I wanted to focus on CPAC work, but the districts were not supporting them at all financially. And so they were just trying to bring information and educational opportunities to their families with no money, and speakers cost money. Events cost money. So there's some push and pull between districts. I think also for families, they tend to go through administrators a lot. So in my tenure with my kids in school, I went through 5 special ed administrators, 3 superintendents, 2 business managers, about 17 team chairs. There was a lot of turnover and so the CPAC had to stay through that all when maybe a new administrator came in that wasn't as friendly. And as Danny said, you had to kind of wait them out till somebody else came in and changed the tone of things. So that's why there's maybe a little bit more separation at times between the 2 groups. But I applaud your support, so thank you.
I think that it's important just to also notice that because we are not required by law or statute, that the district, this was a part of the district uplifting us, was a part of kind of their support and understanding kind of our role as a CPAC, and we're kind of navigating, I think, together what that role is and kind of how we can be a place for parents in our district, but also recognizing that given the structure, it's not necessarily been the CPAC's place to necessarily hear some of those stories and get involved in that confidential kind of piece. So I think that's definitely something that we as a new CPAC are having to kind of both navigate and also navigate kind of the reality that we don't have a law regulating it. So we really do have to work with our district administration. And I would say so far to date, Erin and Dylan have been very involved, but they've also been really respectful of the CPAC parent leadership and letting us really drive the agenda, letting us really drive the planning and providing the support when we ask for it. One thing that got brought up that I just would love to hear more about was the idea of kind of how did you create a liaison from the school board or your school committee, and did you find that was more helpful than just having some CPAC members attend and kind of engage, or how did that kind of transition, or how did that kind of come to be?
So I'll answer really quickly. For us, what happened was, or at least the first one I was aware of in my tenure of CPAC, is that one of the people who was elected to he was elected to school committee and he had been the chair of CPAC.
Yeah.
So when he was elected to the committee, he said, guys, like, I'm here, like, of course. And part of going to the school committee, part of his whole desire to go was to help be a voice for the families. And then after that, we elected another CPAC chair, and she is now our liaison. I will say, as far as a concept of becoming a trusted source, right, and also the sometimes tricky dance of confidentiality, because sometimes people's peculiar situations make it difficult to keep things confidential. But there's a really interesting organization in Needham, which is a citizens group that they call themselves Citizens for Needham Schools. And what they started to do was simply attend the school committee meetings, and then just write up a little report, write up just minutes that were very factual, like a newspaper report. And over time, these folks really gained a lot of credibility in the community. And it was, in fact, CPAC chairs and PTO chairs and those folks. And it sort of became a conduit to people going into the school committee roles. So I've sort of seen in my time, I also do some town government volunteer, some town government things. And what I've seen is that the people who are active in the CPAC roles and some of these other community groups are kind of the natural people to move to school committee and help with those responsibilities.
So I think you're also asking, Colleen, just 1 second, that a lot of school committee boards have asked somebody to be the liaison to the CPAC, to go to their meetings and to kind of bring that communication back and forth. I still want to make sure that the parent leaders, though, feel like they have, especially in Massachusetts under the law, they have the right to go to the school committee beside the liaison. The liaison should not be their sole spokesperson. They could be their champion, but not their sole person to bring the information, because then it's almost like telephone tag.
Oh,
You're
no,
missing,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. She's our touch point, right? And to the kind of question too of, like, is this really something real? Is this something that's going on? Like, I've heard a little something here, a little something there. Sometimes it's a reality check. Sometimes it might be different types of sort of factual check about who does what within the administration or something like that. But I never, ever feel like I can't go to that school committee. I will write them a letter, as the chair, and I will always get a response, and I expect that I would.
And Colleen, you wanted to address this?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make some comments and then I really have to go. But yes, I think it was the district's idea to give us a liaison, and it had been a parent of a child who had been in special education. So they had some experience. They were also, I think, a preschool teacher. And just as far as the school committee in general goes, I would highly encourage you, if you don't already, to watch the school committee meetings. I know they can be a bit dry, but I think the first year maybe I didn't. And I think when you talk to the school committee, like, you want to sound knowledgeable. So you want to have, you want to know what's going on. So watch the meetings. And I know in our district, you can get the agenda. So if there's anything pertaining to special education, especially watch that part, or just even watch that part. And then, I'm just looking at my notes here. I just want to, before I go, because I really have to go, but I just wanted to share some of the main things, that I learned. And so just use your other CPACs, especially those in your area, as, resources.
They're gonna have to build it in
You're the only
Vermont.
ones, right? But you can look, you should join the Facebook pages of CPACs of Massachusetts, get on these mailing lists for organizations like, understood.org. And there's just a bunch of great organizations, and you can post that information to your Facebook page. Just, it doesn't always have to be just pertaining to meetings and whatnot. It can just be informational. And so there's so much out there. So I felt the more I posted, the more engaged people were. You can also, have events. We did it. One of our best events was a executive functioning coach, and we co-hosted with, another CPAC, but then we did another, because the woman was like $200. But then we did another event with the PTO, and they had, how the PTOs go. Our PTO had like 20 grand or something. So they were able to pay for everything. And we also partnered with, we have a community mental health service in our area. So we partnered with them for some events. So just look for partners, especially partners that may have more resources than you, because that really opens up what you can do. And, we talked about the 501c3, our CPAC inherited about $1,000. And the previous CPAC had that status, and we didn't get it back right away. It took a few years, but we did eventually decide it was worth it to have that independence from the district. We had money, so we just decided to go for it, and now we have it. And you do have to file every year. It's a bit of a pain, but once you do it once or twice, it's kind of the same thing. It's not a huge lift. Once you kind of get it set up, that's the harder part. And what else?
I think the money gives you a little sense of control, and that's when you're always looking for the district to fund everything.
Yeah.
There's sometimes they don't want to fund a workshop that you want. So it's the balance there.
Our district had, now we're in a better place, but we had to have two different overrides. So we were always, hurting for money. And so it was not always appropriate to ask for this or that, because they were laying people off and whatnot. So it just gave us the space. And then just lastly, surveys, I would say, we use MailChimp, which is a free server. I think it's like an email server. We use it for, all our communications, and it kind of was like a branding thing. We had like our logo on there, and, we would use that we would do beginning of year surveys to get a sense of what people wanted. What nights worked for them for meetings, what kind of speakers, what subjects they were interested in. And then we would do an end of year survey to do what's working, what's not working, that type of thing. And We also, use Facebook has polls. You can do Facebook polls to get a quick, like, what are people thinking about this? And we also had a good relationship with our district, and we would invite the head of special education, and she would come with some of her team, like her people at the schools, you know, the directors at the schools, and have conversations. So that was actually a good thing to do, I think, early in the year, just have like a meet and greet night where you can, you know, exchange. And the other thing is start meetings with ground rules about privacy and respect. Take notes, have someone taking notes. And then also we found what was good is to do a playground, like a beginning of the year welcome kind of event, and then even an end of year celebration. Now, we didn't do all these things every year, but I'm just saying we did them here and there, and they seem to really help us, meet people, meet potential people who were interested in joining the board and doing work. It's kind of like establishing those relationships. And the more, the interactions you have, the better. So anyway, that's it. And good luck
Thank you,
to
Colleen. We're going to miss you on our listservs. I hope you stay on. I've allowed all of my former SEPAC people to stay on the MassPAC listserv. We're almost 1,000 people right now. Sharing information and stuff. So stay on our listserv because we always need seasoned officers. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Sure, I will. Thank you.
I want to answer all your questions. So I know my people have lots of resources and can answer all of these, but do you have another question, Vermont, for us?
Lana. Well, I have two, and they're very different, but I'm going to ask both of them, and then you can answer only one or both, however. Do you have a formal process for measuring your outcomes, and is that even a thing? So that's one. And then the other one is, you kind of talked about recycling through a whole host of administrators and superintendents. What about the other side of that? Recycling through members and parents, kids age out or they move and you lose your membership. Is there a program or a process to build the necessary skills, the leadership skills that so that, once a couple of key members move out, you don't fall apart? What would you recommend there?
Okay, so I'm gonna, just the first one, when you said measurable outcomes, I'm thinking of all my state and federal grants. So I'm constantly collecting data on to demonstrate that we are doing a good job. And I don't think SEPACs have gotten that formal yet. And I hope they don't, because I think part of what they do is a volunteer job. And so collecting a lot of that data, especially as people come in and out of SEPACs, it would be really hard to do. Doesn't mean, you can't do it, but I think it's not about data, it's about people. It's about their experiences and their kids. So that's what we're focusing on. The other thing is a big issue, and that's why I have a steady job, because I can't tell you how many times there's a whole team of people and their kids exit school and they haven't done the groundwork to nurture new leaders. And a lot of people get really vested in the job and don't want it to change, and so won't let go of the reins. So I started the SEPAC in my district, but I was never the chair. And I have supported all of the other chairs, and they've taken it into lots of different directions that I probably would never have gone. But it's not mine. I created a thing that's living. And so I think Jessica was talking about, like, there was a board and they all left, the kids all aged out, and now here she is rebuilding. So luckily we have her, but she's having to look for new people. So some type of mentoring, some type of structure, having two people share a job. So there are a lot of SEPACs in Massachusetts that there's 3 co-chairs, 2 co-secretaries, so that people are learning together, and one person can step down and the job goes on. So that's my suggestions. Anybody else in Massachusetts want to chime in? Go ahead, Christine.
So I differ with Leslie here, and I seldom do that. I have been co-chairs with 2 and 3 people. And it's wonderful sometimes, and it's really horrible sometimes because we're all nice people and we don't necessarily ever come to an agreement. But what I would advocate for would be having the chairperson and then a vice chair that learns from the chairperson, and then that vice chair steps up and becomes chairperson. I think it's really valuable to bring new blood in and new thoughts. But, you know, when you have somebody comes in, an entire new board that has never been active on the SEPAC, and they're suddenly gung-ho and their kids are in kindergarten and they want to step up, and it's great, but they also don't know what's been going on, and they're reinventing the wheel. So I really advocate the vice chair as a kind of a learning, get mentored, and then step up and take the reins, and then take it in whatever direction you want to go in. So sorry, Leslie, we disagree on that.
And I don't know if you're reading the chat, Vermont, is Danny just put in that, you know, they have somebody who shadows or mentors a role. So that's good. The other thing
That's
you
key.
might want to think about in your bylaws is to have term limits. So a lot of times that the chair serves for a 2-year term and can serve 1 additional consecutive term, but they're out after 4 years. So it forces turnover and new leadership and new direction. So however you structure yourself, I would recommend term limits.
I think that's something that, as we said at the beginning, we're really still in that creating and uplifting some of that structural organizational aspects of it. But I think, and I will say this 100%, I have no interest in being chair or co-chair forever. And I know that the steering committee is really dedicated to trying to create those structures and trying to create those other opportunities for leadership opportunities from other members. And allowing people to kind of have ownership throughout the process. So I really appreciate that feedback and those ideas. And I think that will truly help as we're getting into the bylaw conversation or whatever conversation it is that we want to have with, if it's not bylaws.
I wonder if anybody else has questions on the committee. Are other folks who have questions?
Christine, you had another comment while they're thinking of another question.
Yeah, so something that came up when you were talking about, you know, the PTOs and the SEPACs are working really well together and going to the school committees. Having a SEPAC parent as a voted in school committee member is key. But I think you also have to remember that when push comes to shove and we're talking money, you're going to see your PTO parents turn on your SEPAC parents in a heartbeat, and they're going to go in a free feeding frenzy because SEPAC kids tend to take more cost. And so when they're just looking at the budgets, I've seen it now. So I've been going to SEPAC or school committee meetings now for better than 15 years. When there's a budget crunch and all of a sudden parents are saying, hey, we're losing teachers in general ed, but SEPAC is getting another aid, or I'm sorry, special ed is getting another aid or another, you're going to see them turn on special education. So I think just be aware that it will eventually happen. It has been my experience. I've seen it here in Newton, I think 3 times over the last 15 years. So a good collaboration with PTO is huge, but when it comes down to money, my experience and my watching of it, it doesn't always, it can be really ugly. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Anybody come up with any questions while we're,
I have a question.
Jen, take it away.
Just bear with me here for a second. So I'll get it at, we'll get a comprehensive question out here in a second. So I think basically what I'm wondering about is like thinking back to like beginning of CPAC when you're building up, like if you're trying to get to the point where like you've got diverse input from folks of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different kids of different abilities, diagnoses, whatever, like all these parents are coming together. How are you both ensuring that you've got the full spectrum of like challenges and successes of the special education programs across like all the ages too? So you're getting all the input from everybody and not just the people that, you know, whatever, have the time, have the education to do that. And then also, were you like initially then distilling down, like, you have to remove your own experience and like your own, like whatever, if your like kid has autism, like that's like, you're gonna be your, like maybe bent more on that kind of change, but like, how are you distilling down as a committee what those priorities are? And like, did you put in like systems for that, criteria? So it's like kind of both things pushing together, so that you could very easily like overlook a lot.
Okay, so the first part, I think what brings us all together is we are all going through this experience of having kids who learn differently and having to negotiate with the school to get services. So that's, I think, the thing that brings us all together, regardless of disability type. The other stuff sounded like, and maybe I couldn't hear it exactly, the, the data and all of that information that, you're trying to crunch and, use to support. Is that where you're going in terms of how does the SEPAC gather that data?
It's about making sure that voices don't get hidden by numbers of, like, if you have 4 parents of students with autism or autistic students, and then you only have 1 parent of a student with dyslexia. I mean, in the most simplest format, I think the question was like, how do you make sure that that parent of a student with dyslexia doesn't get sort of overcome by, or how do you make sure if you're not hearing just some stories and not others? And have you created designs in the SEPAC to kind of create equity in the context of that?
It is catch as catch can, whoever shows up. I was that lone dyslexia parent with a lot of families of autism, but we were still in the same game. We still wanted inclusive classrooms. We still wanted, the considerations of the way kids learn differently to percolate throughout, art and music and athletics and everything within the whole rich school community. You tend to also look for, like I was looking for, what do other parents of kids who can't read experience? I went to another SEPAC, I went to Northborough, I went to a dyslexia parent group outside of that, but the work that I was doing within my school system was still around helping families understand the process, because I think that was the hardest thing, that the families who have a child with a diagnosis have to, go through some period of, whether it's grief or just not understanding. They have to learn their kid's disability type. Then they have to learn who, within the system is going to serve them. How does the system operate? How does the medical and the educational work together? How does it work with scouts in your local town? It's all of these things. And that's where parents who have had experience navigating these systems can help other parents. So I think always, if you were a member of that majority for autism, you would just say we need to always look at this in a broader perspective. And one of those things is knowing what your data is in your school district. So I do a class on teaching SEPACs how to find the data on their district. So you can always ask your school administrators, like how many kids in which disability type and whatever, and how many kids are out of district, and how many aides do we have? And getting all of that data and information is important, so that you can advocate for all and not just a small segment.
Leslie, just to follow up on Jen's question, when you're talking about wanting to make sure that you have representation from the different schools or school age groups, do you have a requirement that like each building have somebody? Or I know when we went through, we were very intentional about selecting membership, making sure, because we have 3 different towns, making sure that we had parents in all 3 towns, making sure that all of the age ranges to the best of our ability. were represented in addition to looking at some of those specific categories of disabilities. Do you guys have any thoughts or suggestions on kind of how do you balance that representation kind of across your district?
So I think you're doing it right. I think the only one who's a regional district is Jessica in Bridgewater Raynham. There are 2 communities that probably have K-8 schools, and you come together for the high school. And you're
Yeah.
on mute still. There you go.
Yeah. So, how we set up with Bridgewater Raynham, there are the separate schools, right, for the lower grades, and then 1 high school. And the way the SEPAC operates is almost like we are just one big family. Everybody has an opportunity to be involved. And when we are using the data that we can get from the schools, as far as how many people we have in each of those buckets, it helps us make sure we are speaking to everybody. But also, I found what was helpful for me was just making sure that and I'm making these decisions now because we are rebuilding our board, but like if I have a member at large from Bridgewater, I also have a member at large from Raynham. You know, if I have somebody from one of the towns, I equal it out to make sure there's equal representation from the Raynham side. And that has helped me make sure that we're reaching everybody. So I think data helps, and then also just using that data and utilizing it in a way that you can communicate with impact, I guess, for all.
And you're intentional about your decision making, you know, to make sure that you stop and say, we need somebody from, you know, even the preschool, you know. Look at Newton has 15 elementary schools. Oh my gosh, 4 middle schools, 3 high schools. So there's a lot of collaboration that's needed to make sure that all of those voices are heard. Yeah, that's where it's a lot of work on CPAC. It's not just easy. It's not just who comes. It's doing that outreach, I think. If you can get a liaison from every school, because that parent's probably going to the principal's coffee and reading the local principal, the local school kind of thing. Most CPACs they try to have liaisons for each school so that the leadership is informed, and those liaisons from that school bring the information and issues to the thing. There's just boots on the ground there. And Christine, you want to add something?
Can I just put a plug in also for not everybody wants to social media. On social media, join the Facebook groups, and we have a very active Facebook group. I will not be, because I don't know what people are doing with data. My son may not want to be outed in such a worldwide phenomenon. So keep that in mind. Social media is great for a lot of things. But there are those of us who want to wait until our kids are into a group for special education, because with that, and I know I'm off for that, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. Sorry.
Do all of your CPACs use social media?
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Okay.
A lot of them use the district communication. The district shares through their Connect Ed or whatever, a lot of the flyers, information, send messages. We always ask CPAC to come up with a deal with their district of how many messages per month or per year that they will share. And we also ask them to work with the PTOs of the schools to share their information, because not everyone's on Facebook.
Yeah, just last night in a meeting, a parent said, remember, I'm not on social media. There are others who aren't.
Yeah, and so I do encourage them to develop an email list and use it judiciously so that they're not getting a ton of emails. That said, yesterday on the MassPAC listserv, I don't know who's on it, somebody had a question about a district administrator now all of a sudden thinking about changing the policy that all outside observers had to be Corey checked. And my list blew up and it was just amazing. I think there were 38 messages yesterday, back and forth. This is it. And we have a state law on it and we have an advisory from our thing. And, you know, it was crazy. And then somebody was also looking for a dentist for a kid with autism, 14. So it was a busy day. And I this morning I got up and I thanked the listserv because people got a lot of messages yesterday and it was just a little overwhelming, but everyone stepped up and provided resources as needed. And so having some kind of way that families can support one another virtually was amazing. And ours is statewide. That listserv has been going. I've been on it for over 14 years. And it's been the saving grace for me. And yesterday, I think it was the saving grace for a couple of families who just needed answers and resources. And my people showed up. They were great. And I didn't do anything except read it and approve, read it and approve.
Elizabeth?
So I have a question, like how have you guys handled like some of the lower economical students and parents that are less likely to be engaged or understand or know where to get resources, or that they have the option for resources? How have you guys, or have you guys been able to make those connections and provide those resources for the people that just aren't going to necessarily show up because they don't know that that's an option? Or
Danny, you want to go first?
So one of the things that we've done is we have each school has SEPAC materials, you know, basically paper brochures. Each of our schools has a parent liaison. The school nurses are encouraged to give our information. The school counselors are encouraged to give our information. So the people that we think would be the touch points to any sort of a vulnerable family, you know, have information and are encouraged to share that. We have different populations in our school system. We have kids in foster situations. We actually had a large homeless population of students. You know, they all had their social service touch points, and all of those folks had the SEPAC information. And we definitely heard from those parents and, you know, steered them toward different resources to help them. So I think sometimes it's a matter of getting your info to the people who are, you know, kind of inevitably going to encounter whichever population you're worried you're not connecting with. We've always had trouble connecting with our older students, those like, you know, the kids who transition out of school at like 22. It's hard, we lose track of those kids in ways. So we made a real push in the last couple of years to be in touch with their teachers, to be in touch with the coordinators of those programs. We went to the site where the kids have their different programs to say like, we're here, we want to know you. So.
I think it's using some of the agencies too. We have a network of family resource centers in Massachusetts. You may have something similar. So making sure you go there. I can't say enough about that personal connection to just say, I'm a parent too, and I want to hear your story. And we're teaching families to tell their stories so they're comfortable talking to others. You know, just making that cultural broker, you know, somebody in the community. I put up flyers and posters, you know, in all of our apartment complexes so that they would know, like, we're here, you know, this is a parent. We're also holding some of those meetings in different locations because they don't have transportation. So it's being really flexible and, you know, thinking that out and how are we going to, who's not at the table and where do we need to go? And Christine, you have a quick comment.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different languages spoken in Newton, and it was brought to our attention by a member. There's issues that won't.
I'm sorry, we can't really understand.
And it's taken a lot of cultural work.
So you're breaking up a little bit, Christine, so you can throw it in the chat.
I'm sorry.
A couple of
I
my,
missed some. But anyway, I've sat at basic rights workshop meetings.
Just to point out, I think we can utilize affinity spaces in our districts because we have had some for lower socioeconomic conversations in the equity. So just a side note on that for another resource in our district.
Just in my job, that it's always in my head, like I'm always trying to think of how can we really spread that.
Yeah,
That's what
I love that.
I wanted to see what.
So a couple of our CPACs are using new software, and we're going to try it next month at our community chat to have all of, if the program's on Zoom, all of the captioning, I think, can be, you can pick one of 20 languages so that they can participate, because sometimes the translation and the interpreters, we've done things in 7 languages at any given time, but the CPACs don't have the same money and funding. So we're going to try this software. Malden used it. I think they were doing workshops in 6 different languages, and I said, "What do you guys use? I want to try it." That's the other thing is always being receptive to new technologies that can help you reach new families differently. They do have to have the technology, and a lot of people are on their phones for technology, and so knowing that is another thing of how to make your stuff accessible through someone's phone.
I just want to recognize that it's 7:25, so we have about 5 minutes left. I want to respect everybody's time and our presenters' time. Is there any final questions from our group here or final thoughts from our presenters? Leslie, I'm going to be honest, I can't see all of the chat from this far away. I'm trying to screenshot some of the emails, but if there is a way, I think you sent all of the emails ahead of time. Are these the folks that you had planned on and the emails you gave? Okay, great. So I can share those emails with the CPAC. You can share the presentation recording with us as well.
Danny sounds like she doesn't want to be a part of this. Wait a minute.
No, I just want to say that there's a way to save all of the chat out of the Zoom.
I'll save it and share it back.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's just the ellipsis at the bottom right. So you can download all of that as a text file.
Great. Since we're not controlling it, we just wanted to make sure. All I want to say is this has been amazing. Thank you so much to Leslie and to each of you who were able to join us this evening, who answered our questions. They were very, well thought out, and I think it really helped to frame some of the conversations that we've been having, kind of about what our next steps are in this first full year that we're really working together. I imagine that you will get many emails. I'm just going to warn you because there's a lot of really active people in this group who I imagine will have follow-up questions if you're all okay with that.
Yes. I mean, we're here to support. You guys are part of our family now. You realize that's what makes that connection, is we are all parents of kids who, have gone through systems, and it's not easy. So we're happy. And look, they're all putting in the chat, feel free to reach out to me. They're all very different. They're all very dedicated. I work with wonderful people every day. It keeps me going. Watching these volunteer parent leaders do the magic in their districts. And I'm so excited that Vermont is moving forward in this. We can shine a light on you so that other districts in Vermont, I'm happy to come to talk to special ed administrators in regional meetings about CPACs and why they're really important, because I think families get involved in schools, and we know from family engagement, when families are involved, kids do better. So we will save the chat, send you the chat and the resources, and please reach out to us. And thank you so much for inviting us.
Absolutely, and thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great night. Thank you, guys. Thank you so
Good night.
much.
Thank you.
That was fun, a little hard to hear, but
Okay.
we made it work.
Yeah. Bye now.
Bye.